the decision to become a mom or the decision to partner or not to partner. Like, there's just so much that goes into it. And so the more authentic you are with yourself, the more powerful journey you will have. It'll just be that much more of exactly how you're meant to do it because you're listening to your own intuitive decision-making process.
I'm thrilled to be speaking with Pamela Mendoza Brasunas, People Ops Leader for Early Stage Startups and Birth Doula. As a startup leader, Pamela creates and nurtures company culture for startups with an ambitious mission. She currently serves as the head of People Ops at Ampersand, and she previously helped grow startups like Udemy and Carbon Health, as well as the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. A trained birth doula, Pamela founded her doula business Butterfly Birthing, inspired by her work with Planned Parenthood, where she guided and supported pregnant teens. Butterfly Birthing educates women by preparing them for labor and laying the foundation for empowered birth experiences. Pamela earned her BA in Ethnic Studies from UC Berkeley, and she's a graduate of the Art of Leadership Mastery program. She's an avid backpacker who completed the Pacific Crest Trail. She loves to dance, support the arts, and spend time in nature and with her family. Pamela, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for that introduction. It's wonderful to be here.
Pamela, I'm so excited that we could make this interview happen. You're currently almost 40 weeks pregnant with your second child, and I'm very aware that labor could start at any moment. You mentioned that this time in your life feels like a sort of culmination of your fertility journey project. When you think back to all the mothers you've supported as a doula, how does your personal journey as a mom fit into the bigger picture?
Well, my personal journey into motherhood was definitely an inspired journey by all of the women I've supported over the years. I've been doing birth doula work for about 22 years. And I think at the beginning, I was just in awe of the process of labor and women's ability to kind of find their strength and courage in these really challenging physical times and moments. And so I just rode the wave of their ability to kind of work with their bodies to really deliver a baby. And I got to see that for 17 years before I even got pregnant myself. So by the time I was ready to be a mom and I was pregnant, I had a lot of information and just in my body from witnessing all these fantastic births and labors that it was an informed birth because of everything I got to witness those 17 years prior. And it was a wonderful way to go into motherhood.
Wow. It really brings to mind this word that you use, empowered, and empowered birth experience. And this is the experience you had giving birth to your first child and what you'll have with your second child.
Yeah. I mean, it has a lot to do with my connection to my body. And I think that the journey of becoming a mom is one being very aware of your body, you know, the habits you have with your body, your conditioned tendencies, the things that kind of drive you or don't drive you or motivate you or don't motivate you. All of this stuff comes up when you're deciding to be a mom. And also, I think once you become a mom, you have to kind of still guide the same desires that live within us still have to be honored. And so there's a lot of shoulds. There's a lot of loud noise about how we should be a mom or how we should even do our labors. And it's crucial for women to be really connected to like their desire to feel connected to the experience of their labor, but also the decision to become a mom or the decision to partner or not to partner. Like there's just so much that goes into it. And so the more authentic you are with yourself, the more powerful journey you will have. It'll just be that much more of exactly how you're meant to do it because you're listening to your own intuitive decision-making process.
Pamela, you are one of the most embodied people I know, And you also support people in becoming more embodied. You shared some of the things you're most passionate about: communication that generates action, leadership through body awareness, and providing language and texture to transformational experiences. When you think about the Bay Area, startups, tech, Silicon Valley, where would you say we are as a culture in terms of embodiment?
Wow, that's such a fascinating question. I would say that there are many awake people in the Bay Area, which is lovely. There's many awake people in the world. And so it's good to get out there and get out of our own little comfort zones, whatever they are, like the community we come from, the schools we attend, even the like parent group we hang out with. Like, you need to get out of your comfort zone to actually practice a deeper embodiment. And so, I would say it's really across the board. If people are pushing themselves to be almost in uncomfortable situations and grow themselves, then their embodiment will improve, and they're probably going to have a more vast experience of the world that they're living in. But if you sort of stay in your zones and you stay in your certain modes of thinking and you really are committed thinking that they're right, which is fine, it does create a limitation though, in terms of like what's actually available and accessible to you. And so I really do not like personally to hang out in the polarities of like yes and no, black and white, wrong and correct. And because I feel like when I do that, I and I have strong feelings about things, but like, I feel like when I do that, sometimes I am cutting myself off from other possibilities. And so it's definitely one of the things I do in the birth room, right? Is that, hey, we have a birth plan, but it doesn't mean we have to stick to it, because as you go through this process, things are going to come up that we can't prepare for. And some of them are physical, and some of them are emotional, and some of them are not even available to us until we're in this circumstance of feeling like we're a little bit out of control. And so, how do we care for ourselves and how do we nurture ourselves when really we're just dealing with the unknown of the world around us, is sort of the key driver for a lot of my decision making. So as a culture, just to go back to the question, how are we doing? I think those that are pushing themselves are doing quite well. And I think those that are sort of a little bit in their zone and their I won't call it a rut, but just like there's what they know, it's a little more limiting for them. And I wish them courage and bravery to try new things and meet new people. And, maybe even take some long meditative breaths when we're hanging out with people that we think we can't really relate to. Like, maybe we can, and we just need to take the time to figure out how we can relate to them.
There's so much good stuff here. Getting out of your comfort zone, meeting people who are unlike you. In a way, your ampersand seems pretty separate on the surface to pretty different things. But in another sense, the connection is that it's all about giving birth to human beings, to companies, to culture, to things that are bigger than our individual selves. What are the other connections you see between the startup world and doula work?
Well, it took me a long time to see this. I was an ampersand that struggled, that thought I was going to, like, when I was doing one thing, I felt like I should be doing the other. And when I was doing the other thing, I thought I should be doing the other. And the same thing happened to me when I became a mom. I wanted to be a really good mom, but then I was stressed out about like my work life and wasn't getting enough attention. And then I would be doing my work life and I would be feeling like, oh my gosh, am I not spending enough time with my babe or my child, as he grew older. And that was definitely a process I had to quiet. I had to quiet this, like, I'm in the wrong place. So in terms of my birth doula work and also my work with startups, I had to quiet that piece of me too, thinking that they were different and separate. And I just kept trying to figure out why I enjoyed them both so much. And so the similarity for me is the creation of something out of nothing. And like, the innovation behind the startup world, or like a concept where someone wants to turn it into a business, a viable business, is also very relatable to like when a person or a couple is deciding to create a child. Is it, viable? All of the decisions you make and sort of their own learning and evolution. And so it starts in the preconception phase. In fact, I think for women, it even starts before they're partnered, when they're actually thinking about, how can I do this well? And some want to do it well on their own, and some want to do it well with a partner. And so it's like this preconception phase is way before sometimes we've even met our partner. And I think in the startup world, this innovation, this creativity, like it exists for founders before they even really know what they want to do. They're like exploring, they're researching, they're meeting people. So they're sort of gathering data on their own, like, birth of a concept. So the energy is similar. It's ambitious, it's brave, it's courageous. And then it's sort of this combo of like, well, we're going to do it. We're going to try it, even though we don't quite know what we're doing. And then there's just this huge learning that I see in both places. And then a series of decisions that are, need to be made kind of from the internal person, the internal founder, the internal mother embarking on this journey. But we're still bombarded with everything that's telling us how we should do it. And so it's a navigation. You're basically the captain on your own ship, and you have to be able to navigate your true essence with the loudness of what you should be doing or how you should be doing it. And it's a very tricky ride, whether you're a founder or a soon-to-be mom.
Ooh, the creation of something from nothing. That's incredible. And you have had some incredible wins in the startup world. You helped to grow a startup from 10 employees to over 1,700 employees. And Udemy, the first startup that you helped cultivate culture at, went public in 2021. I saw an article about you called, quote, "Who's your office mom?" And this was back before you were actually a mom of a child yourself.
Yes.
Looking back on that time and your journey through startups, what are your reflections now as a mom yourself? Do they need an office mom? What do these cultures need?
I would say they don't need a mom. They don't need the role of a mom, but they need nurturing. They literally, if you're like a plant, someone needs to water the people to be inspired to, hang out in the sun and do some growth. And, the founders need nurturing too, although that's not exactly what they think they need. But sometimes having someone who doesn't have a strong opinion in the room is exactly what that founder needs as they sort of source the truth for themselves. And so I would say that it's not necessarily, the office mom as much as it is, well, what does the office mom concept sort of bring? Well, someone who's a good listener, someone who has the ability to hold options, right, for you as you're kind of going through a process of making decisions. Someone who nurtures and cares and hopefully kind of loves you unconditionally. Like whatever you choose to do is fine. Like that's your decision. And that gives, people courage to explore things that maybe they would not have felt like they could do before. Oh, this unconditional acceptance is crucial for our children. It's crucial for our friendships to develop in a healthy way. And it's crucial for companies to have that kind of acceptability of all their people and where they are, and, sort of an awareness of what they're providing and what we also need. I'm a big fan of supporting the people be who they are and excel in this environment if this is a good environment for them to grow in.
Every company needs this type of leadership, and it's not a gendered role, right?
It's totally not a gendered thing. And I've learned over time because I've seen it in both genders of just sort of this nurturing approach to growing your people, growing your culture. And it helps. It helps. We have plenty of competition in our worlds. We have plenty of competition between companies, in schools for roles. And I think that there is something about the nurture aspect that kind of can move us out of the competition piece, which is a really good place to grow from, right? This nurture versus competition.
Let's take a moment to reflect on this question. When have you been in a work environment that felt nurturing as opposed to competitive? Outside of hosting this podcast, I partner with leaders in the workplace to turn professional challenges into leadership successes and career progression. I love working with executive leaders, aspiring C-suite professionals, and of course, ampersands. If any of this sounds interesting to you, reach out to me at jessicawan.com. That's JESSICAWAN.com. Now, back to the show. You founded Butterfly Birthing over 20 years ago, and you've been working as a birth doula alongside building your startup career. What did the day-to-day or week-to-week look like for you when you were in the throes of doing this balancing act, when you had clients going into labor, which cannot be predicted, and also companies that you were building? And often in the startup world, there are fires to put out and urgent situations. So two worlds that were fairly unpredictable.
Yeah, I really lucked out. I have to tell you, I at first sort of used to hide my doula work, and I'd be like, okay, I would rely on my backup doulas if for some reason I couldn't be there, right? If I couldn't be there because it happened to be, a whole team meeting on a Wednesday morning, I might send someone else. But I ended up really in a place after doing this for maybe a few years, just deciding to be a little bit open about it and asking like, hey, I still would be interested in doing, 5 to 7 births a year. This is probably what it'll look like. You might not even notice. And I got really transparent with my first 2 startups, and it was amazing and helpful. And what was interesting is the people that I worked with got excited. They were like, oh, are you on a birth right now? And then they would kind of track it, even though I might not miss a single day at work. It's the kind of thing where I'm getting texts in the afternoon, right? Things are happening. I might go to like the hospital or the birth center after work and then do a birth, and then it's like 4 a.m. and I go home and sleep for a couple hours, and then I would go to work the next day. So there was a lot of luck and a lot of grace in those years. I somehow managed to do both without really compromising either. And I had parameters around that, right? Like I wouldn't take more than X amount of clients at a time. So their due dates had to be certain spaced out. And there was a whole phase of my birth doula work where I was working to prepare, women, parents, families for the arrival of their little one or their labor process itself and their decision making. So that stuff all would get scheduled on a weekend, which worked for parents anyway. Like they would want to, they're like scheduling me on Saturday morning, like 9 to noon. So it never really conflicted when I had scheduled classes to teach or scheduled one-on-one sessions. There was no conflict. It was only when the labor happened. It was like, okay, can I be there? Okay, I can be there in 2 hours. Can I be there tomorrow? Actually, I can. And you just move meetings around and you inform your people that are already kind of clued in. And it was super fun. It was so satisfying for me because I'm so deeply connected and committed to both of those things in my life. And by being transparent and by being honest about these things that were important to me, I'm sure I was able to do more because I had support and buy-in for what I was doing. So I don't think I really took away from my startup commitments. I was very committed to my work. I still am very committed to that work. And every time I'm with a client, it's the same thing. But that's why I have always taken few clients in 1 year. And that is why I I want them to have my full attention so that they feel like they're getting what they need out of having a doula present.
You mentioned that it took a little while to get comfortable as an ampersand. And even this story of talking to the founders and being transparent about your doula work, it took a little while to get there. Were there moments or milestones along the way that helped you get more comfortable with being transparent and showing up more holistically?
Absolutely. I think one of the most significant parts for me was when I was starting to be referred out by an adoption agency, who the birth moms were coming to the agency and didn't quite know how they wanted to handle this process of adoption. And these were things I could schedule. These were things that would happen after work, or these meetings with these birth moms would happen on the weekends. I'd meet them in their environment. Sometimes we were like on the streets meeting in a park, and I supplied all the blankets, and we would sit in the grass. And there was something about what I was providing in terms of communication in this sort of what felt like a hectic time sometimes for these birth moms, and also a very delicate time, and really so many opportunities for their own empowerment as they made their decisions along the way, that I just was so committed. I was so committed to the process that all of a sudden I was like, well, I can't even really abandon these women. Like this is like they're in their process of empowerment and making the decisions they want to make about bringing this baby into the world, and choosing these adoptive parents and then meeting them for the first time. It's like I didn't even want to miss anything. And so that for me is when I knew I didn't need to divide myself up so much, because this work was so important, and that I would just have to express the importance of this work to this other part of my life. And they got it. And that's what I meant. Like I was lucky. I was lucky. I never really had to fight against to prove the value of this thing I was very interested in. And, on the opposite side with a client, I would be like, look, I do this other work. I'm a full-time employee. This is my schedule. We can meet anytime during these hours. And then there would just be off days where I'm like, if you go into labor on this day, just FYI, my backup doula will be there, and I will be there as soon as I can. But so sometimes I just have these very clear, can't be there moments, but it was all discussed ahead of time. So there were no surprises. And I was just lucky. The clients understood, my founders understood, and I got to do both for many years. And it was amazing. It was really, really, talk about an empowering experience. It's like living the life you want to live. I was so happy to be there for both sets of these needs, these circumstances. I was really happy to be there for both.
What advice would you give someone like you who has two or more very important parts of their life that they want to invest time and energy into?
Well, it's really an individual's process, but I would say embrace what you love. And if it's 2 things or 4 things or 7 things, you will have to make some decisions in terms of what gets the bulk of your time. But that's kind of a practical decision. Like you could literally divide your time up into percentages and figure out how to do it all. But you also don't want to feel like you're overcommitted and you don't have any time for self-care or regenerative energy for yourself. So it's like a process. Like you kind of have to play it out and practice and see what feels good. But I would say, yeah, if you're interested in more than one thing, you don't have to limit yourself. In fact, it would probably be sad if you pursued one and felt like you gave up something else that was really part of you. So I would encourage people to do whatever they want and then do the practice. Like do whatever they want and do the practice of, can I make these 2 things work for me? Or can I make these 4 things work for me? Because we're, like I said, you're the navigator. You're going to have to figure it out on your own. You're going to have to test it out. You're going to have to get skills that help you be able to balance in that way. But it's all possible.
What can startup leaders learn from the birthing room and vice versa?
So the journey's full of unknowns. There has to be a willingness, I think, at times to pivot and to let go, like just to change course and then to do that process of release, right? Like, oh, okay, we're doing this now. I actually think it's a little bit easier in the startup world than it is in the birth room. Because, like I said, the whole preconception to conception to pregnancy to the birth room phases could be decades, right? And so sometimes letting go of things of how you wanted to be in the birth room are actually a little more ingrained and longer living in our spirit than that in a startup environment. But both environments require like agility and the ability to pivot and the ability to change a direction and totally embrace something new and physically release this attachment to how we thought it was going to be or how we wanted it to be. And I think when you're leading a team, it's very hard, right? You have other people to take in consideration in the startup environment. I think when you're in a birth and labor room, if you've done your prep, you as the birthing mother know that like actually it is all about my decisions. I'll have these recommendations coming in from the hospital, my birth team. I might have like the opinion of my partner, but like at the end of the day, as the birthing mom, like really you should be holding all of your decisions and feeling very good about all the decisions you make along the way. And I think in the startup environment, it's harder because you have more people to take into consideration, especially if the pivot's going to completely drop a department, right? Or drop an initiative that has been like the push for the last 2 years and you weren't quite getting the results you needed. It's like, yeah, these are really hard leadership decisions. And there are people involved, right? And so that's one of the main differences. Yes, there are many people involved in a birth, but it's mostly like a healthy labor for a healthy baby involves that mother and the baby. Whereas I think in the startup, when you make these decisions, it's actually good to remember that your decision making will and probably affect multiple people and or departments and or the direction of this company. So there's a bit more to hold, I think, there. But there's data. There's so much data in both worlds that hopefully the research and the learning we did to even be those leaders, you know, in the birth room or at a startup, hopefully we have the data, we have the research, we have the right people around us to kind of help us move forward with our decision making.
Wow. There are so many connections and so many learnings and so many great nuggets of wisdom in here. Through these interviews, we're co-creating the Ampersand Manifesto, Principles for Leading a Multi-Passionate Life. What would you like to add to the manifesto?
I would love to add laughter. We are laughter and literally like physical enjoyment and contentment of our experience in the world. We can be a very heady culture. You know, we can think above the shoulders. We can do all the research in our head. And so we mentally made the right decision. But this was the stuff I was talking about at the beginning. If you don't have a body connection and your body is also not moving forward with this sort of same decision making, then you're going to be in conflict. You're going to be in conflict because you're like, oh, but I did the research. But you're like, but I don't feel good. You know, so it's like, okay, I got to figure that out. Like, yeah, maybe the research for all these other companies is not going to work for you, you know, or maybe this story you have from your mom and your grandmother is, and your friends is like not going to work for you in the birth room. And so, so really that do the research, but then also do the body checks. Make sure you have an awareness that your body actually feels good. And so when that happens, I would love to add to the manifesto, yeah, can we laugh a bit more? This is a very challenging world we live in. And it's fun when we can laugh and sort of like, oh, we're doing the best we can, have that as a memory and have that as a knowledge that like, wow, some of these things are out of our hands and we have very strong feelings about them. But where can we actually feel good in our lives, physically good, and so that we just have more to offer others, right? I want to offer people feeling physically good in their environment. I do. I just want people to feel good, feel like they're connected to their decision making and connected to their bodies. And that from there, they're very powerful and they don't really need a lot of outside noise to tell them how they should do it. Or, it's a beautiful thing when you feel good in your own body.
Oh, I love it. Pamela, it has been such a pleasure talking with you. Folks, you can learn more about Pamela at butterflybirthing.com or find her on LinkedIn. We'll link to these in the show notes.
Thank you, Jessica.
If you liked this show, hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends and fellow Ampersands. And if you're enjoying our show, please consider leaving a rating or a short review so that more people can find out about the show. I had a chance to listen back on my interview with Pamela, and I wanted to share a few key takeaways. 1, the preconception phase and just how long this phase might be. Whether it's parenthood, a startup idea, or a creative project, these seeds might have been planted a long time ago. I have an 8-year-old son right now, and sometimes when I tell him stories about the past, before he was born, he'll ask, "Where was I?" And I'll respond, "You were just a thought, a spark, a twinkle in my eye." Back in those years, I wasn't sure I was going to be a mom. But that idea was in there somewhere. And now I think about the magic in what the seeds might be now for endeavors in the future that I'm not even fully aware of. 2, unconditional acceptance at work. This is such a rich topic and one that I think more leaders want to engage with. In my experience coaching executives and people managers, there's such a desire to foster a collaborative, supportive workplace environment. But putting that into action can be quite challenging. It seems like unconditional acceptance is one key element to creating positive work cultures and one that people want to be in. 3, the duality of serious commitment and laughter. Pamela exudes both of these qualities so beautifully. She takes her role seriously, both as a people ops leader and as a doula, because she knows the impact that this work has. At the same time, it made me smile when her answer to what should be in the manifesto was more laughter. Even if you do impactful, important work, you need to make sure that you're not approaching everything so seriously.
Talk about an empowering experience, like living the life you want to live. I was so happy